Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Grimm Times podcast. This is the part two of my interview, I guess. Christy is still here doing the interviewing for me.
Hello. So first off, one of the things I didn't really mention at all in the last one was how did the Jeff Jarman show get started? How did you think about it, come up with the ideas to get it rolling, decide who was going to be in your first episodes?
I started Taekwondo when I was 14, and I'm 24 now. So it's been about a decade that I've been doing martial arts. That's kind of cool. And I actually got into martial arts thanks to Dragon Ball Z. I think I've said that in a previous podcast. But um, anyway, so I started doing Taekwondo at 14, and I can't remember when exactly it was, but eventually Randy would start joking with the parents who would come in to watch their kids, and I would walk in the door, and he'd be like, "Oh, hey, have you guys seen the Jeff Jarman show? This is Jeff Jarman of the Jeff Jarman show. It's on late nights on TBS or something like that." And it was just this fun little joke that kept going for a while, and then eventually I got a camera, and it was just a little. It was like a regular picture camera, not a video camera, and it had a video recording function. And I don't know why, but one day I just got the idea, hey, let's make the Jeff Jarman show, and we'll just, because I'd always had an interest in film as well. And if you had to pick a passion, I guess that would be one of mine. So it was a good opportunity. It was just a good idea for me to try out and see how it went. And as for coming up with skits in the early days, man, I can't even remember how we did that. I don't think I really had any skits. At first, it was just going to be the talk show type setting where, it's kind of like, the Conan O'Brien show, or, well, late night with Conan O'Brien. But, the title character is the host, and he interviews celebrities and things like that. And Skylar was one of the guys I just started talking to again because in school we'd always kind of known each other and been friends, but not like close friends at all. And it was just one of those deals where, we each had our own path in school, and that's pretty much, they didn't intercross that much except for like when we would go to Votech, we would ride that bus together out there. And so we would be on the same bus and we would occasionally talk and all that kind of stuff. But after school was over, I'd have to ask Skylar about this. I don't even totally remember, but we had started talking somehow. Maybe it was on MySpace or Facebook or something. It might have been MySpace at the time. And which, by the way, I'm thinking about getting back into MySpace as another promotional tool, just because I almost like the fact that you have to rank your friends as like a top 8, because maybe if you rank one a little bit higher than the other, then that one might be like, oh, I got to try a little bit harder to maybe get ranked back up in front of, yeah, you'll be number one, Christy. Yeah, but anyway, that was just a little side thing. But anyway, yeah, so we kind of started talking on there again, and that's where we really kind of discovered that we had the same kind of interest and things like that. And yeah, it was just kind of a weird coming together. But eventually, we started hanging out again, and then he decided to help me on the Jeff Jarman show because I had told him about the idea, and he was like totally down with it. So we went to my current place that I was living with Jeremiah Archer, who is a very good friend of mine, and we lived together for a little while. And the first 2 episodes were filmed there, and the first one was filmed on that little picture camera that I think it was a Sony Cybershot, a little tiny little thing that we stacked up on a bunch of books on a coffee table on top of, or no, it was a coffee table with a box on top of it with books stacked on top of that. That was our tripod. So for the very first episode, and maybe the second as well. I think it was the second episode as well. I didn't have a tripod at that point, but I think in the third episode, I actually had invested the money into getting some good equipment, so or decent equipment for the time. That was under $600, that kind of deal. So yeah, we got the equipment, and I had the so yeah, we had the camera for that first episode, and I pretty much just sat down and interviewed Skylar. We came up with the idea for him coming out of the closet because it was just kind of one of those funny, almost double entendre things where it's like, it would just be corny for us to do that sort of thing. So um, Yeah, and I even had the chair propped up against the door handle, acting like I had locked him in there. And I don't know, but it was really corny, and it wasn't really that funny either because we had no idea what we were gonna say, and we were kind of cutting each other off, and I had music playing in the background, so it messed with the audio a little bit. So um, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way it came together, though. It was a good first effort, and I'll always have good, those fond memories of those episodes, those first few that really got everything going.
So going along kind of the same lines as that, a few episodes in, you started coming up with these ridiculous inventions that Randy would sell for 6 payments of 99.99 or something like that. So how did you come up with the ideas for all these different types of inventions, just plays on normal everyday things?
Again, like I said earlier, Randy came up with a lot of ideas on his own, and almost every product, I think actually not almost, it is every product that Steve Hyper has sold, Randy came up with on his own. He can come up with some really good ideas, and that is a huge help when I'm trying to write the show and make the show. And it makes my job as a director that much easier as well because when you've already got everything in place, I've just got to be like, all right, let's roll cameras and get what we get. So a lot of those ideas, like the solar powered clothes dryer, that is the famous one. That for a long time that was our leading video on YouTube. That had the most views by far. I'm not sure. I think the Alexandria homosexual skit actually was really close. It was those two skits that were neck and neck for a really long time on YouTube for being our most watched. But at this point, all of our other episodes have really taken off. So I'm pretty happy about that. I'm trying to think of how many views we've got on YouTube. It's got to be close to 5,000 now total between all the Jeff Jarman show episodes in particular. But then even now, I mean, even on the latest episode, he came up with that one, the Steve Hyper energy drink or whatever we called it. I can't even remember now. But yeah, there were quite a few really good inventions, and like the names in particular, Steve Hyper and Arrogance, they all have that double meaning as well. And Randy came up with all those on his own as well. So um, yeah, and I mean, not only that, but Johnny came in on the sixth episode, and his character was an instant hit. I mean, he can do that voice so well, and it's such a character that it's one of those things that people would really laugh at if they had just seen it. So that's why I'm trying to get all these videos so highly publicized and get them out there because we have such good content, especially compared to a lot of what's on YouTube nowadays. And if people see it, then I think they'll really appreciate it for what it is.
I would think so. I mean, it's just a matter of getting it out there to the public because you got to kind of add tags in there that people are going to search for so that you get that publicity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and nowadays with social media and everything else in between, it's so easy to get your own content out into the airwaves, to where people can see it because years ago we just didn't have this option. So I think now is the perfect time. It's an open market where you could get discovered on YouTube in one day. You could have a million hits, a million views. So I mean, now is the perfect time. It's the best time I think for creating your own content and getting it out there. Thanks to the distribution of YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all those different avenues. I mean, I prefer Twitter obviously and YouTube, but Facebook is good as well. It's just when people are on Facebook, they're not really looking to head out into the rest of the internet and check out all these different things because I don't know the internet when it first came out, it was one of those deals where it was so wide open. You could go wherever, and it was such foreign territory. And then nowadays, people are like backing down into this little corner of the internet known as Facebook, and it's like we don't really want to venture out anymore. We just want to stay in our little network, and this is all that exists on the internet now. We just want our own little section where we feel safe and we know people, and it's like a I don't know. The internet is like an apartment complex. You want to stay close down to your neighbors. You don't want to go visit the crazy guy on the eighth floor or something. So it's just one of those deals where maybe Facebook isn't the best place to try and push your stuff because you can create a page for your thing. Like I've got the Jeff Jarman Show page for Facebook, and how often does it get used? Almost never. So, I mean, it just depends on what avenue you want to go down, I guess.
Alrighty, so back to your show and its production. How did you do some of your sound effects? Because I know that there were a couple of times in like your CCW episodes and I think a couple of your Keepers of the Key episode where you had to kind of add your own sound effects into it. So how did you go about doing those?
Largely, all of the sound effects were made for CCW. I didn't have to add a whole lot for the Jeff Jarman Show or Keepers of the Key. I know for a couple on Keepers of the Key, usually it would just be added in later or done separately. Like we did one show, we only did one episode for it, and it was called Fallout. And it was kind of styled after Fallout 3, in the post apocalyptic world. And this was actually done by Skylar, the one special effect that is in there. And it was like we were running through the forest away from these aliens or whatever were attacking the Earth at that point, and this laser beam comes out and hits the ground and a little bit of smoke comes up from it and it lands right at Skylar's foot, almost just almost hitting him, and it looked so cool. And I still to this day do not know how Skylar put that in there, but I've got to find that out one of these days from him. I think he said that he went through and used paint and did like frame by frame by frame adding that in there, and that is some dedication. And Skylar, if you're listening, I really appreciate that. And so yeah, that's one little effect. But for CCW, a lot of things we would do is like if we would have, like there was the one time I kicked Randy in the face, and when I did that move, I was like 5 inches from his head. I didn't even come close, but I did it at the moment, and I think I might have used the old pro wrestling trick where you kick the guy and you slap your wrist or whatever, you slap your hand, and it's kind of hidden from the audience's view, so it makes that slapping noise like I did make contact. And so it was just one of those really cool sequences where even though I was wearing socks at the time, which is kind of funny, it made that smacking noise. So and then like also we would have Chandler, again Randy's son, um, banging or slapping two boards together to make that noise of clashing. So yeah, and then like for the ring bell on CCW, we had some weightlifting equipment and all that stuff in on the right side. You've probably noticed that in the shots. There's this huge pole sticking out of the ground, if I remember right. And we had one of those, I can't remember if it was a dumbbell bar or something, but we would bang that against the pole, and it made the perfect like bell sound. So it was just really good for that situation.
So do you think, because you've gotten pretty passionate about WWE in the past couple of years, do you think that all your research and knowledge into all the things that they do and how they do their moves is going to help you with CCW? Make it look a little more professional, or are you wanting to keep it looking kind of corny and funny like you've been doing?
Well, we're definitely going to do more CCW first off. I want to make sure everybody's well aware of that, and maybe even Johnny and Randy don't know that yet. But hopefully they'll be on board for that one. I want to do a lot more. We've still got the CCW title belt that we made. Randy's wife, Jessie, helped create that, and it looks awesome. I'm really happy with it. So we're going to do more of that. I think that the deeper I get into pro wrestling, because it is such a passion of mine, and I kind of regret that I didn't get into it at an earlier point in life. But now that I've actually gotten to watch it, and I think I started watching it around 2009 or 2010, somewhere in there, maybe earlier. I'm not sure. Maybe 2008. It's hard to say. But anyway, I think it was toward the end of Batista's.
I thought you told me 2006.
Well, see, there was a time when I started watching it, and then for some reason I just forgot about it and taken a break from it. Maybe that was when I was like, I mean, I've always been into NASCAR really hardcore since 2003 or something. I think 2003 or 2004. So, I mean, I just, I had lost track of wrestling for a little while, but then when I got back on board, I'm like an addict. We've got the WWE Network, and I'm watching pretty much every show that they do. So it's one of those deals, and I really appreciate the fans who are like this, where you just can't get enough. So getting back on track here, I think that it is definitely going to help the show. Maybe some different moves that we're going to try and pull off, and we obviously don't have the same ring that they do, so we're a little bit more limited in that. But
Or the same safety equipment. There's a little bit of that to consider. I mean, I know they do some pretty crazy things, but I wouldn't want to see my fiance jumping off anything really high and slamming into anything very hard, personally.
well, yeah, I'm not going to go too crazy with it. I mean, we're still going to keep, we're going to get, yeah, not Skylar. I'm not going to make Skylar jump off any roofs or anything like that. But I think that I'm definitely going to keep the silly element to it because that's our main draw right there. We can't do everything that the WWE does, and so I want to have kind of that goofy aspect to it. And because I mean that's why we did the caveman thing. It didn't start out as being caveman thing, but we realized that by the sounds that we were making during that first match, it was like, oh hey, this would be really funny if we just acted like we were cavemen and went with it. And so, um, yeah, and that's why you see my goofy character like the samurai in a Tai Chi outfit coming out to Meatloaf intro music. So, I mean, it's just one of those things I really enjoy, and I like to have my little moment of glory where I'm a pro wrestler, and it just makes me really happy. So, yeah, I hope to do a lot more of that and get more creative with it.
One of my questions I have is kind of a big one about Keepers of the Key. Um, in the very first couple of episodes, you're with your uncle, and then you split off from him, and you guys go your separate ways and get sent into different places in time and different dimensions and stuff. So, do you have any plans at the moment to kind of go back and do a couple episodes about where your uncle went?
Right now, we actually don't have any plans for that. I definitely want to do another episode with him. I don't know when we're going to do it or where. We'll probably just act like. I mean, the last scene in Keepers of the Key, episode 2, has us going up the stairs. So that doesn't really say that we went anywhere differently. It doesn't insinuate either way. So we'll just continue on from like we went through the same door and we ended up in Missouri because the last episode was filmed in Colorado out in the mountains, and so yeah, I think we'll just pick it up in Missouri and go from there, see what we can do with it. I mean, you can create a lot of different sets just out of what you have in indoors and, maybe certain places outdoors. So I'm very interested to see what we can do with it going forward.
Another thing with Keepers of the Key is that when you had your brother in that mask and he was crouching outside the house and then he disappeared, that was really impressive to me. And I think you've explained to me kind of how you did that before, but that was just a really cool special effect that I was curious about.
Yeah, and it's that kind of thing that's so simple to do in the editing room. I mean, not to bore you with specifics or anything, but it's pretty much just basic editing. You go in and like at this point, I've learned so much more about it, the editing part. And in the future, if I come across somebody who is a better editor than I am, I will gladly let them take over that aspect as long as they keep what I want in the show. Um, you know, it's like what Chris Hardwick said: as you go forward, you've got to realize your strengths and weaknesses. And if you're if you're almost holding your show back a little bit in a certain area, you got to be willing to step aside, and you can't do everything yourself forever. You got to eventually step aside and let the experts do whatever they are an expert at. So, and just to explain that one little scene real quick, basically all we had to do was put the camera on a tripod because you don't want it to move at all. It's got to be completely stationary. Have Zach in the scene and have him. I think he crouched down when he disappeared, and I just had him in the scene. Then I had him crouch down, and then I was like, okay, now we're gonna cut here, but I didn't cut the camera. We're still rolling, and I had Zach leave, and so then I just let the camera keep recording, and it's recording nothing. It's just totally blank. There's the scenery there, and that's it. And then in the editing room, I just go in and I add a fade effect, and I cut the track to when he knelt down and when it was empty, splice them together with that fade effect, and it looks like he crouches down and fades out and just disappears. So it's a really simple trick, and it's really easy to do. Next time, I plan to have a side by side type effect with Randy talking to himself or something like that. That image is just so funny to me because we kind of did it with the pro wrestling thing at one point where he's doing these impressions of different pro wrestlers, and I want to do something like that again in the future, and it'll be more legitimate looking, I guess.
One of my last questions about Keepers of the Key is definitely a less serious one, but how did you not only come up with the idea, but how did you actually get the bag tied onto Skylar's head so that it would stay there and look the way it did?
Um, that's actually a good question. I don't totally remember how we got that bag on his head, and there was no real reason for it either. I think it was Skylar's idea actually to have the plastic bag on his head, and I think I remember standing in the bedroom tying this bag on his head and trying to make it not pull his hair but get it nice and tight to where it would stay on, because it was a little bit windy outside that day, and yeah, it was just such a goofy thing, and that was the point of it. It was just this goofy offshoot of like a what if type of scenario where we could mess around and do something a little bit different than just the Jeff Jarman show. And so, yeah, I mean, you just tie it like you regularly would a bag if you were tying it together, but on a man's head. So,
When did you decide that you wanted to expand from video filming into starting your podcast and expanding into that
that
genre?
realm. Yeah, that realm.
Expanding into that genre of publicity and
You know me being at home all the time with me, I'm a huge fan of podcasts. And I listen to them all the time as she rolls her eyes as I say this, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Art Bell. He is the master of radio, and he on Coast to Coast AM is what really inspired me to do something like this. Um, I don't know. I mean, I've just always been so into talk radio, and I've always kind of wanted to do it myself. And this is the easiest, best way I could get into that. So I think that it will help my speaking ability and kind of just give me a better presence on the air, whether it be on visual camera or just behind a microphone. So and it just gives me another way to express my views and interview different people and learn about different things and get a public record out there where people can listen to this and maybe learn something and maybe if not learn something then at least open their minds a little bit to think about these different things and research them on their own. So the Grim Times podcast was just something that I really want to do for a long time, and it allows me to still stay in contact with Johnny and Skylar and have those guys on the podcast, and like with Carl and getting all these different people on here. It's really just a fun, fascinating time for me, and Zach as well. I got to do that one while we visited out in Missouri with him, and yeah, so I think it was just one of those deals where it's something I want to do, and hopefully people will listen to it and allow me to continue doing this into the future. To where it's actually worth my time to do it if people actually enjoy it. So
when you originally started, did you have any plans to do like a specific focus? Because I know Coast to Coast is kind of paranormal stuff, and then you've got Steve Austin's podcast where he talks to just different wrestlers. So did you have any particular theme, or were you just kind of going with whatever came to mind at the moment, whatever you thought needed to be discussed and made known?
I think when it originally came to be, it was going to be a paranormal talk show with Skylar, and it was just one of those deals. Like the Grim Times is actually a name that he had used for one of his groups on Facebook. That was kind of a forum about different things like this, and he very graciously allowed me to use the name for the podcast. So we just kind of took that and ran with it, and I want to open it up a little bit though too, to where it's not just paranormal. It's about anything. I mean, it could be economics. It could be
Dragon Ball Z.
yeah, Dragon Ball Z and sports like NASCAR and wrestling and different things like that. So just pretty much whatever I feel like talking about, video games, things that interest me and hopefully interest a lot of other people, especially whether it be in my age range or above and below. as long as I still enjoy doing it, I plan to keep doing it. And when I get back to Missouri, there's a lot of different people I want to interview. I want to talk to Randy about, maybe his life early on and his future plans and what it's like to be a teacher and, being that way for so long. Um, I think it'd be a really interesting show and do a couple more with Johnny and all these different people that I could get. Um, I think people would really appreciate hearing all these different walks of life and hearing these things they don't normally get to sit down and talk to this person about, and kind of do it more at their own convenience rather than having to force a conversation or something like that. Just learning about people. I mean, the more that you can learn, the better. And hey, this is free, so it's free life lessons, I guess. So the filmmaker in me wants to tell a story, and it's the same for pro wrestling. I think that's why I like it so much. Is it these guys, they tell a story in the ring, and whether I'm doing that with film or talk radio or wrestling even. I mean, any way I can do it. And I think that's what really makes a good filmmaker is when you want to tell that story and you want to move people and you want to affect their lives and make them think about things. And so I love a good story, and I think a lot of people do. They just don't know it. So yeah, it's just a good opportunity to learn about people. I mean, if anybody has a story for me, I'm willing to listen. And I think I've changed that way from being when I was in school to now, because back then, if it was just like a story out of a history book, it would bore me to sleep. I mean, I could not care less. But now at this point, I'm kind of like, I wonder what Napoleon did with, all these different battles, or, I wonder what it would have been like to be buddies with Abraham Lincoln, and be like, dealing with all these different things and him talk to you, because he was just a guy like anybody else. And so I think that's what it really boils down to in filmmaking and radio and all these different things is just telling a story and enjoying the human experience. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Grim Times podcast. Thank you all for listening. This was our first episode going up to half an hour, 30 minutes. So we'll see if you guys, were able to pay attention for that long or how boring I was on the mic. We'll find out. But anyway, let me know your feedback if you get a chance. Look us up on the website, thejeffjarmanshow.com. I'm at jeffjarman55 on Twitter. Find us on Facebook and YouTube as well. So, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you later. Friends, but not like close friends at all. And it was just one of those deals where, we each had our own path in school, and that's pretty much, they didn't intercross that much except for like when we would go to Votech, we would ride that bus together out there. And so we would be on the same bus and we would occasionally talk and all that kind of stuff. But after school was over, I'd have to ask Skylar about this. I don't even totally remember, but we had started talking somehow. Maybe it was on MySpace or Facebook or something. It might have been MySpace at the time. And which, by the way, I'm thinking about getting back into MySpace as another promotional tool, just because I almost like the fact that you have to rank your friends as like a top 8, because maybe if you rank one a little bit higher than the other, then that one might be like, oh, I got to try a little as well. And if you had to pick a passion, I guess that would be one of mine. So it was a good opportunity. It was just a good idea for me to try out and see how it went. And as for coming up with skits in the early days, man, I can't even remember how we did that. I don't think I really had any skits. At first, it was just going to be the talk show type setting where, it's kind of like, the Conan O'Brien show, or, well, Late Night with Conan O'Brien. But, the title character is the host, and he interviews celebrities and things like that. And Skylar was one of the guys I just started talking to again, because in school we'd always kind of known each other and been friends. A bit harder to maybe get ranked back up in front of yeah, you'll be number one, Christy. Yeah, but anyway, that was just a little side thing. But anyway, yeah, so we kind of started talking on there again, and that's where we really kind of discovered that we had the same kind of interest and things like that. And yeah, it was just kind of a weird coming together. But eventually, we started hanging out again, and then he decided to help me on the Jeff Jarman show because I had told him about the idea, and he was like totally down with it. So We went to my current place that I was living with Jeremiah Archer, who is a very good friend of mine, and we lived together for a little while. And the first two episodes were filmed there, and the first one was filmed on that little picture camera that I think it was a Sony Cybershot, a little tiny. I think I've said that in a previous podcast, but um, anyway, so I started doing taekwondo at 14, and I can't remember when exactly it was, but eventually Randy would start joking with the parents who would come in to watch their kids, and I would walk in the door, and he'd be like, "Oh, hey, have you guys seen the Jeff Jarman show? This is Jeff Jarman of the Jeff Jarman show. It's on late nights on TBS or something like that." And it was just this fun little joke that kept going for a while, and then eventually I got a camera, and it was just a little. It was like a regular picture camera, not a video camera, and it had a video recording function. And I don't know why, but one day I just got the idea. Hey, let's make the Jeff Jarman show, and we'll just because I'd always had an interest in film. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Grimm Times podcast. This is the part two of my interview, I guess. Christy is still here doing the interviewing for me.
Hello. So first off, one of the things I didn't really mention at all in the last one was how did the Jeff Jarman show get started? How did you think about it, come up with the ideas to get it rolling, decide who was going to be in your first episodes?
I started Taekwondo when I was 14, and I'm 24 now. So it's been about a decade that I've been doing martial arts. That's kind of cool. And I actually got into martial arts thanks to Dragon Ball Z.